Hey everybody, Nailed or Failed Reviews. Today we're going to be checking out the Latchet brand and their 7-way trailer Junction Box Bundle. Let's talk about it right now on Nailed or Failed Reviews. Hey everybody, thanks again for joining me on Nailed or Failed Reviews today. Again, we're talking about some RV products. We need to replace the 7-way trailer wire coming off of our camper trailer. And so we decided to pick up this Junction Box Bundle from this newer brand called Latchet. They're popping up on Amazon with different types of RV products. So I thought I'd give it a try and show everybody what it consists of, what you get in the box, and then talk about the installations. So this is going to be a pretty handy item for us because if you've ever had to deal with trailer wiring, you know that usually they just jam everything into the smallest box possible from the factory. And this is a really nice way to avoid dealing with any of those factory connections. I mean, obviously, if you want to be thorough, you could go and check all those connections. Usually they're just on there with wire nuts. But this is going to make your life a little bit easier because you can just find a nice spot to create to mount this junction box, cut your old trailer 7-way wire, and then put some ring terminals on it, you know, like we have over here. And then you just hook it up to this. So it's really, really simple. The problem that we're having on our 2018 or 2019 Coachman Apex Nano is that, again, it'll tell us the brake controller is disconnected. And so I'll pull over and I'll basically put my knife, my pocket knife, into the blade area and pry it back so that it's closed all the way. Because basically our little plugs here have just worn out. And so it doesn't stay connected. Now, I also, at the same time, I've already done this, but I replaced the full 7-way and 4-way wiring harness that comes from the factory. We're working on a 2008 Toyota Tundra, and so these are really handy from Hopkins because these replace the exact OE fit, and they just plug right in. So you get under the truck, you unplug some pretty substantial plugs there. They're very hard to unplug, and then you just plug in this new one from Hopkins and you're good to go. So that's a 1-2 punch to solve the overall issue of, hopefully, if there is a problem with your factory wiring harness or the 7-way wiring harness from your camper trailer. And they've got this nice box here with a diagram on the back that should serve the majority of users out there. So if your trailer is at least 20 years old, I would say this should suffice for you as far as the way that this is wired up from the factory, in this packaging. So what you're looking at is, if you look at the plug, and so you see you've got all your 12 volts in reverse and right and left, blah, blah, blah. And so that matches up. Now on my Toyota Tundra, they're nice enough back in the day to offer this cover on the factory unit that shows you what each pin goes to for backup or brake controller or battery, whatever. And that matches up with this diagram. So that's really, really good. I'm happy about that. This is 8 feet long, so you've got plenty to work with. And you want to make sure that you put this in a good position where it's not going to get tangled up in your weight distribution bars or anywhere else. And you want to make sure that you don't have it too long so that when you are going down the road, it's not going to drag down the road. So if you check out the article at nailedorfailedreviews.com, we'll have some affiliate links for the Latchet brand, for a bunch of different products from them, as well as all the wiring stuff that you're going to need. Maybe you need some wire strippers. You're definitely going to need ring terminals to make your connections in the junction box. And maybe you have some other wiring to do. If you find some cracked wires like I have when I'm doing this process here, I've got these solder seal wire connectors. These are really handy to just splice together some cracked wires or whatever you got to do to clean up your wiring. Either way, let's open this box and we'll show you what's inside, how it looks, and then go from there. Okay, so what they've included with this are some other gaskets that you can use. They've definitely included more than a couple spares. So you've got those there, and you have different areas on the junction box itself to go into. So you can come in from the side, from the bottom, from the top, and then you can see the main one here. Now this is really nice. They've done this, somebody's thought this out. You can see we've got all of our wires color coded. They've got the terminals color coded, and then even if you can read that there, the colors are molded into the plastic. So it says red, yellow, green, brown, blue. I will point out that the little screws that hold the cover on, they just come out. They're not captured in there, and there's just 2 of them. But if you're working outside and you turn this upside down, your screws are going to fall out. So just be aware of that. So the last thing I'll point out is the size of the box. And so you can see here, we're looking at about 6.5 inches long, 3.5 inches wide, and 1.5 inches deep. So it's a pretty decent size. But as far as where you're going to position this on your camper trailer frame, just be aware that it's definitely going to take up some space. So you want to find a nice, compact, out of danger's way to mount this bad boy. You can also see we've got 2 mounting holes here, 1 on each side, and you're going to need to supply your own self-tapping screws to get that mounted. So now we're out here, and I want to give you a few tips for setup when you're talking about where to install this new 7-way wire and how long should it be. But I wanted to see what my max length is. So if you attach a tape measure to the front of your coupler, measure out to the end of your plug, what I have is about 24 inches. So you want to make sure that you don't go too much longer than this. If you know that your 7-way wire is already a good length. So I know that if I go too much longer than this, it will drag on the ground. So I don't want to do that. And we've got an 8-foot new 7-way wire that we're using here. So in an effort to avoid trimming down the new latchet wire, because if you do have to trim this down, the length of it, then you're going to have to redo all these connections here. And that's going to be a real pain in the butt. So if you can find a location that's far enough away so that you'll get your proper overall length once it's connected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this box back there behind this section in the front of the A-frame of the trailer where the propane sits. So you can see that little pass-through hole right there. That's this front rail of the front of the trailer, and it's back there behind all this stuff. So it's going to be a good location to keep it tucked out of the way. Obviously this would be like the easiest spot to put it, just right out here on the front. But again, if I do that, I'm going to have way too much trailer wire coming off the front, and it's for sure going to drag on the ground. Okay, so one other thing I'll point out has to do with the wiring. And once you figure out the location of your junction box, you really want to screw it down into place so that it's always going to be in its permanent position. So we have our position where we're coming in, and then basically you want to cut it all the way on the other side of the box, because in this example here, since this white cable is all the way over here, the white cable on our old 7-wire is going to be the longest one in the junction box. So that's why we need to run this all the way through and cut it out here so that our white wire can meet with this one. And then, for example, like our blue wire from the old 7-way is going to be the shortest. So that's going to be opposite from the way that Latchet does it, because Latchet's coming in this side and we're coming in this side. So again, figure out where your box is going to be, mount it into that position with your self-tapping screws, and then when you are trying to figure out the length that you need to cut for your old 7-wire, remember, you have to be able to reach all the way to the other side of this box. So that's why we're going to set the wire like this and cut it all the way out here. So we're going to have to cut back all this sheathing. Make sure you do that carefully so you don't cut into your main wires, and then strip each one, put a wire terminal on it, ring terminal, and get it connected. All right, so now we're under the trailer, and I wanted to show you what it looks like when you're getting it all wired up, and why making sure that your box is mounted and all your cable lengths are figured out is because when you're making these connections and you're going to clip these wires, you're not really going to have room for error. So if you cut, like for instance, this blue one is going to be our shortest one. If we were to cut it too short, or any of these other ones too short, then you're going to have to, pull more sheathing back. And so what I've done is I've given myself a little bit of extra sheathing. I've basically tucked it up around there. And so it comes, the old wire comes from back there in that junction box through the frame and then up around here. So if I do mess up, I have a little bit more wire length to use. But again, I just wanted to show you how you can easily do this. You want to make sure that you cut those correctly. And basically what you can do is, if you get everything mounted up like this, you're going to know this is its final position where it's going to live. You just line up the wires and see where they end. And then that way you'll be able to clip those in the appropriate place to put your wire terminal on and then finish up all your wiring. But the area that you have to work within the box is pretty tight. So if you make some of these wires too long, you might have to wind them up. You can see my black one there was a little bit too long, so I wound it around one time and then was able to fit it onto the terminal. So just wanted to show you what that looks like. Now we're going to go down the line and finish wiring all my ring terminals onto here and then get it all attached. All right, so remember to check out the article at Nailed or Failed Reviews for affiliate links to go shopping on Amazon for other things you're going to need to do this job, like a box of ring terminals. These are all have heat shrink on the ends, and that's really what you want for wiring up, trailer and automotive stuff, is that heat shrink, so it glues it down onto the cable and have a really, really solid connection. So again, check out that article at nailedorfailedreviews.com for things like those heat shrink ring terminals, things like wire strippers and other wire tools you may need to get this job completed. All right, so pretty happy with the installation. This is the final product and what it looks like. You can see we've got all of our wires cut to the correct length there, and it all fits in there pretty good. It was a lot easier to get installed than I thought. So definitely enough room to get your wires in there, as long as you give yourself enough room to do it. One thing I wanted to point out was to make sure that before you put your wires on the terminals, you want to make sure that you slide the rubber gasket over your 7-way trailer wire for where it goes into the box, and then it has that hold down right there. So make sure you slip that gasket over before you do all this wiring, and then you'll be good to go. And then also, before you put the cover on, you're going to want to put your solid gaskets into the spaces where there are no wires coming in, and especially over here on the end where they have that other open end for your 7-way trailer wire to come in. So next to that hold down, we'll put one of those solid gaskets into there, and then it'll be good to go. Other than that, I definitely recommend this Latchet brand 7-way wire that's 8 foot long with the junction box. This is going to make your life a lot easier to get it hooked up, rather than going into that box right there and dealing with all the wire nut connections that they made from the factory. It turned out really good. I want to show everybody how it looks in the connection going into the truck. It's really nice and solid, obviously, because it's a brand new plug, and those tongs inside of there are going to be nice and tight. And I can show you here on this Hopkins brand, at least, it's got that little nub on there that's going to lock on to the back of the plug. So that's going to keep it. Most plugs have that, but on like my the original one, 7-wire from this Coachman trailer, it was a very small shoulder for it to grab onto on the plug. So they got a nice beefy one for this top portion of the cover of the plug to grab onto it and hold it in. So what you're looking at here is I've got a hardwired backup camera on my RV. And so we make this connection here. This is an RCA with power, and I just make this connection every time I'm towing, and then I have a backup camera on my RV. And so it has 2 wires coming off of it. I just took some wire loom and wrapped it around, and it comes back up here, and we've got a few things going on. So we've got everything wired up, and you can see it's all zip tied down and goes back to the junction box. So I really liked how this turned out. I definitely would recommend picking up the Latchet brand. Again, check out the article at nailedorfailedreviews.com for information on their products and more on this installation. So again, they have that wiring diagram, and that's totally good for the majority of people. Definitely in my case, checked all the turn signals and brake and lights and everything, and everything's working great. It says that the brake controller is there, so that's always good. And again, if you want to check out the video on making this third view camera, basically, You have to just make sure you have the right head unit to take over 3 cameras, or at least 3 cameras. And then you can see how I've got a backup camera, a front view camera on the front of this truck, and then when we hook up our trailer, we have a hardwire connection to a backup camera on the back of the RV. So it works out really well. But I'm going to finish this up here. I definitely recommend checking out the Latchet brand. Find more info at nailedorfailedreviews.com, along with our affiliate shopping links. Really appreciate the support. Like if you like, subscribe, check out the other videos. Thanks for watching Nailed or Failed Reviews.